What's going on, guys? So in front of me you were looking at my father's new to him but pre-owned Flagstaff E-Pro travel trailer. We did a full video on this one. This is the E15 TB Flagstaff. He got it pre-owned, and this thing was in immaculate condition. And what's crazy is he went to a dealership looking for this model. They didn't have one new, but they had just gotten a pre-owned one in on trade. So that is really cool, and he uses this as essentially a tow-behind suite, master bedroom suite for his Class B Winnebago. So yeah, this is a really cool setup. I've done a couple videos on it now, especially one where we swapped the air conditioning unit out, but we showcased a full review of the inside of this as well as the Winnebago and explained why he ended up with this trailer and why he tows it behind the Class B. But today he's towing it behind the mustard yellow Nissan Frontier truck that he bought as kind of a runaround beater truck. So he bought this truck pre-owned. So this is a 2001 Nissan Frontier with a supercharger that's been disabled. So the supercharger is not connected right now, but he basically bypassed the supercharger. But the challenge you can see here is the squat. So we're seeing a lot of squat going on hooked up to this relatively light, actually very light Flagstaff E-Pro. We had a couple different options to try to fix that. One of them is to install Timbrens, but I think the main one that we want to focus on today is to put in weight distribution. So let's go take a look at the product we'll be installing today. All right, so I already covered this stuff in a previous video, but let's quickly go over what we're looking at. This is the Timbren setup that will be installed on his truck, not today, but the main reason why we're not putting this on today is because specifically for the Frontier, it requires that we weld on two little discs that have to sit above the axle that essentially cradle these when they're compressed. If you didn't watch the video where I went over all of this stuff and showed you how Timbren systems work, you should go back and check it out. The top part is relatively simple. It's essentially a bolt in place. But the bottom part that these make contact to, again, require two flat metal discs be welded onto the axle housing, and that's something we don't really want to do right now. So instead, what we're going to do is install this Reese SteadiFlex weight distribution hitch with sway control. And the difference between this and other weight distribution setups that look very similar are the fact of how the friction is made on this specific setup. So most other systems, including Equalizer, Fastway, Curt, a lot of them, they use the L brackets for friction. And what do I mean by that? These L brackets are mounted to the A-frame of the trailer, and when these spring bars rest on them and slide back and forth as you turn, that friction between the bottom surface of the spring bar and the bottom of the L bracket cause sway control. Basically, it limits how easily the trailer and the truck can hinge together. Well, Reese took a different approach to it. It's essentially the same technology, but they've enhanced it. And the way they've enhanced it is by adding actual automotive grade disc brake material to the bottom of the L bracket. So right there, you can see that there's actually disc brake material. So there's actually 4 points of sway control on here, but it's done a little bit different than like Equalizer. Equalizer has 4 points, but they do it by compression here and then by friction here. The way the Reese system does it, it does it by friction here, but as you load the weight distribution hitch up with the truck and trailer, it's going to bend and press up against this flat surface right here, which creates friction here and friction here. So this is a really innovative solution. It weighs a lot less because this is a lighter weight solution. So this is designed for a maximum hitch weight between 600 and 800 pounds and a maximum tow weight or tow vehicle weight between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds. So this is going to be a really good setup for that little E-Pro and how it's going to be configured. So the first thing we need to do is disconnect the truck from the trailer and take some measurements. Okay, before we get back to the weight distribution hitch, my father replaced the tires on his trailer. So these came from eTrailer. These are provider branded tires. These are 225/75 R15 radials. And the tires that were on here, correct me if I'm wrong, they were the Westlake, kind of that off-road, kind of a Goodyear Wrangler design tire, right?
Yeah, they were a little too aggressive for my likes, and they were a 235/75/15, which added, along with the lift kit that was already installed on the trailer, that added a little more height than I liked. So going down a size to 225 widened the number of choices I had for tires, and I wanted something with a more of a highway non-aggressive tread, and these fit the bill really well.
Yeah, so far have you been enjoying them? I mean, I know that it's a tire, so as long as it doesn't blow out and it rides smooth and doesn't track your trailer all over the place, it's probably
I like that the trailer sits a little bit lower. It doesn't look like it's such an off-road type setup. But haven't really carried it on a long trip yet, so I'm looking forward to doing that. But they seem to be riding just fine. Like I said, I do like that the trailer sits about an inch lower now.
Yep. And next year you will be taking this on a pretty long trip, right?
Yeah, we're going to be out for probably at least a month, going all over the western United States.
Yep. So you definitely want a good tire. And what's nice about it is this has a pretty nice tread pattern. Typically when you look at ST style tires, they seem as if they're a bit weak, a bit wimpy, but these actually look pretty aggressive in terms of the tread pattern design. A lot of siping going on through here, so if he takes it out in areas that have snow or ice on the road, they should be able to handle pretty well. But yeah, he got these from eTrailer, Provider, 225 75 R15 ST radials. Very cool. And the load range on these specific tires are E-load range. More than enough for this mini Flagstaff E-Pro. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is actually check the tongue weight. If you guys haven't seen the video that I've done on this really cool E-trailer, this is an in-house product that they actually produce. This is a tongue weight scale. This thing is super, super awesome. It's made out of pretty much all aluminum, except for the base, which I think is galvanized steel. But yeah, this is a scale that gives you the ability to check the tongue weight. And what's really cool is it goes up to like 2,000 pounds. We're gonna go and get it unhitched. We're gonna check out what the tongue weight is currently. I have a guess. My guess, well, first of all, do you have full propane cans?
Yes.
So they're full propane cans. How many batteries? 2 batteries?
2 batteries. Okay,
and you have an electric front tongue jack. The dry weight on this unit is, actually it'll be right here, 2,539 pounds. GVWR is 3,866 pounds. Man, this thing is super lightweight. My guess is that you have about 500 pounds worth of tongue weight, mainly because of the batteries, the tank. Do you have a lot of stuff in your front storage?
No.
Not really much? Okay, so that's going to limit it quite a bit. So if this thing was fully loaded to go, and he doesn't really have to load this up that much because he has the Class B van, I'd probably say there might be 300 pounds worth of stuff in the front. But because this thing isn't loaded up hardly at all, I'm going to say it may be a little lighter than that. What do you think?
I'm going to say 480.
480. All right, let's get this unhitched and check it out. Okay, and just so we're not here all day long lowering it, I grabbed my Anderson jack block. If you recall this from a previous video, this was torture tested with the mini excavator, just to see how strong it is. If you didn't check that video out, go back and watch it. But let's go ahead and offload the trailer. He was wondering if it was going to hold it, and I told him, yeah, he shouldn't have any problem. Okay, so we have it in place. Not sure if we're going to be able to retract it completely because my idea to use the jack block may work against us right here. But it's getting close. See what happens. Not transferring any weight yet, and we are all the way out. Okay, so we've gone with 2 of my mighty pads and 1 of my snap pads. This is also the torture tested snap pad, by the way, so the mini excavator got a hold of both the snap pad and the Anderson block. Just gonna lift it up high enough to remove the jack, and then we'll lower it down on top of the tongue weight scale. This is one of those things that if you have your trailer at a hard angle whenever you decouple it from the vehicle, you want to make sure that you kind of straighten it out and you don't have any preloaded tension on the axle assembly of the trailer, because if you load the weight onto here, this base might become very unstable once you take the weight off. Okay. So we are at, what do you think we're at? You said 400 and...
I said 480.
480. Okay, what did you say, Mark?
I said 525, right?
525, and I said between 500 and 550.
Yeah.
We are at 450 pounds. 450 pounds.
Okay.
So,
if I was to empty the rear cargo hatch, it might be 480.
Okay, so if there was no propane loaded on here, you have 2, are they 30-pound or 20-pound tanks?
20.
2 20-pound tanks. How much you figure each battery weighs?
They're group 24, so they probably weigh around 40, 45 pounds each.
Okay, so you got about 90 pounds worth of batteries. You probably have about 80 pounds worth of propane. and the front. So if you remove all of that weight off of here, then it'd be under 300 or under 400 pounds worth of tongue weight. So that's kind of the key thing here, is that a lot of folks, they read the stickers, they look at the dry weight, but they don't realize that the minute you start loading this stuff up, you can easily start getting a lot of additional weight added to the tongue of your vehicle. Now here's a question for you. If this was your only RV and you didn't have the Class B and you had the front storage loaded up the way you would load it up for like a cross-country trip, how much weight do you think you'd typically have in that front storage?
Well, the only thing in the front of this would be the cabinets where the sink and the stove are. There's no front storage.
Oh, there's no front storage on this unit. Okay. What about under the bed? Or the bed, is it in the front or the back? The bed's in the back.
The bed's towards the back, yes. It's about midway over the axle.
Okay, so in reality, this unit, because of its lack of front storage, you really can't load it down as much as you might load down a traditional travel trailer with front storage. So all of the weight is really added to the back of your RV then, right?
Yes.
So how much weight would you say you have loaded to the back of your RV right now, had, you know, this been your only RV on a cross-country trip?
If we were going on a cross-country trip, we probably would have somewhere around 250, 300 pounds loaded in the back.
So if you had the front storage, like most travel trailers do, you would have that weight up front, of course. So that would easily spike this to probably in the 500-600 pound range, probably 600 pound range. Okay. And the only reason I'm saying this is because it's understanding how storage impacts tongue weight. Same with the toy hauler. If you have a toy hauler, the minute you start loading your toys in the back and that weight is positioned behind the axle, that's all of a sudden going to start removing hitch weight off of the vehicle. All right, so we have a good starting point here, and what we're going to try to do is get the weight distribution setup installed and configured so we can level out the truck, level out the RV, and make for a safer, more even towing experience. Okay, now you took some measurements from your mustard truck. I'm sorry, it's actually called Sunburst, Starburst?
Sunburst yellow.
Sunburst yellow, mustard yellow. And the measurements were from the top of the tire to the bottom of the fender.
No, from the ground to the bottom of the fender.
Okay, and the measurements he took were from the ground to the bottom of the fender, both on the front and back. And what were your measurements?
In the rear, it was 33. In the front, it was 35. That's with the trailer connected.
Okay, 33 in the back, 35 in the front. What about the trailer disconnected? Let's take those measurements now. So now we are right at 35 in the back and 34 and an eighth. Let's just say 34 up front. So 34 and 35. So it's almost been reversed. So yeah, this is going to be interesting to see what weight distribution does once we get the hitch installed and dialed in. Okay, so like all weight distribution hitches that are set up in a very similar way, we need to make sure that these brackets are actually installed between 25 to 32 inches from the center of your ball coupler, right here, down the side of, or down each side of your A-frame. So if we measure that, that's going to position it somewhere between here and here. I know we can't put it here because the battery tray is welded to the A-frame right here. So we're likely going to put it right in this little area between the propane cover and the actual battery tray, and that'll give us the space we need. And on the other side, you can see we have the exact same spacing. So that's roughly, it's gonna be roughly 30 inches to the center of the coupler. So we'll have the other bracket mounted right here. So yeah, we have the spacing we need to get this all aligned the way we need to, except we'll just have to remove these little levels that he has on each side of the A-frame. Okay, so the L brackets are gonna be right here. And then we have to pay attention to the instructions to know specifically which bolt holes to go through. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of disassemble the L brackets. Okay, so this one will slide up from this side right here. I want to make sure I'm not going over any wires. You don't want to pinch any of your wires at all doing this. And this side's going to go through here. I'm going to feed one bolt in place. Okay, so because this is a 4-inch frame, we're going to feed the bolt right through this bottom plate. Like that. There is a wire on the other side, so I want to always keep in mind where that wire is so I don't potentially make contact with it whenever I'm tightening everything. And then this bracket will be right here. And then once we put this bracket in place, this will then be bolted to it so we can get the brackets, the L brackets, positioned where they're going to be most effective. So I am checking to make sure I don't have any interference, which I don't. Got them nice and straight. Now we can go ahead and tighten them down, and you want to kind of transition back and forth between the two so you're tightening it down evenly. This is also an area you have to be really careful when you're tightening your weight distribution brackets down, and a lot of dealerships even make this mistake. They over tighten these brackets and they actually crush the frame section. And if you do that, you've instantly caused a major potential for a catastrophic failure of the front A-frame section on your trailer. This is such a critical part when it comes to putting these on. You don't want to over tighten them with an impact driver. You want to get them to where they're nice and snug, they're even, but then you want to go back with a torque wrench to make sure that you haven't over tightened them and that they're tightened down specifically to the 75 pounds that they're supposed to be. All right, so we're not going to tighten these down right now. What we're basically going to do is, once we get the hitch head installed and we have the spring bars in place, we want to make sure that when they're resting over the friction material, they extend past it at least 3 inches. And we want that to happen because as you turn, those spring bars are going to slide in and out of this friction material. And what you don't want to have happen is during a sharp turn, the spring bar comes out and drops off of the L bracket. That could be pretty bad. So you don't want that to happen. We're going to just keep these the way they are for now. We're going to install the other brackets on the other side, and then once we get the hitch head assembly in place, the L brackets back here, we'll see how they sit, and then we'll tighten these accordingly. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is level out the trailer, and the simple way of doing this, since the trim on this RV is flat straight across, or it's straight, we are simply going to measure from the edge of the trim. So we measured the front, it was 19. The back, we're still at like 23, so we still need to raise the front up some more. Quite a bit more, actually. Okay, right there. So we're about 22¼ in the back and 22¼ in the front. All right, so just to make sure we're covering all of our bases, we took a remeasurement, 33 inches between the top of the fender there, the bottom of the fender there, down to the ground, 35 on the front. We have it hitched up temporarily just so we can scoot it back a little bit, because the goal here is that we get the entire truck on the concrete pad, which we've now been able to do. So next thing we're going to do is go ahead and chalk the tires, get it taken off of the ball, and start the process of getting the hitch head dialed in specifically for the weight distribution that we need. Okay, so now we have the spring bars in place. We've flipped the shank. We have this to, you could probably put this one level up just so whenever we level out the trailer, we want to hitch the two together. We're going to level out the trailer, which means it may lift this up slightly, but I think we need to move this assembly one step up. And then what we're going to want to do is back it up and make sure that these bars sit only 3 inches below the L brackets, and that'll give us the ability for us to position the bars on top of here. So that's also going to be determined by the number of washers that we have to put in here. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an angle right here. The washers keep the hitch head spaced back, which puts downward pressure on these bars, which once we load the bars onto these brackets puts downward pressure on the L bracket and also the friction material right here, which creates both your weight distribution and your sway control. Okay, so we have too many washers. We put 4 of them in, but the angle positioned us about 4.5 to 5 inches low here, and we want to only be about 3 inches, so we're going to take one of the washers out. Okay, we've removed one of the washers. We only have 3 of them in there now. Lowering the weight back down. We figured out that this little bubble level is pretty accurate, so we are pretty much level right about now. And
22¼ over there.
Okay, that's about 3 inches.
Yep, pretty close.
So I think we're in good shape. Okay, so now that we have everything spaced properly, we're going to have the 3 inches we need over here. We have the 3 washers in here. You have to put a set bolt. You can kind of see it through there. it goes in the back and it pushes the hitch head assembly up to put the tension against this bolt and the 3 washers that are there. So it just says to tighten. It doesn't specifically say to how much. So all we're doing, again, is kind of raising this up so this is loaded up with pressure and you don't have to worry about that being loose. All right, so now the hitch head is configured. So now all we need to do is load the spring bars onto the L brackets. They'll help determine what angle these need to be at before we tighten it. Because again, you want the flat part of this making flat contact with this friction material right here. That's gonna be how you get your sway control. It'll work with weight distribution regardless if it's flat there, because you'll have the downward pressure on the L brackets, but you want, again, this to be as flat as possible with that so it creates as much friction, which again produces your sway control. Okay, so now we're going to use the tool that's included to preload the L brackets. There we go. Okay, so we have this one secured, locked down. This top conical washer was backwards, so I had to pull that out and put it in, but this was in place. You can see that it is resting nice and flat on the friction material. We're going to go to the other side and secure that one as well. There we go. We're going to secure that. And we tightened these. We didn't keep them completely loose. We brought them in a little bit just because there's quite a bit of pressure pushing down right here, and we want to make sure that that we set these properly so they don't come out. Okay, everything is tight, and you can see how it's shifted, right? You can see how this looks a little different. Again, we put these to 75 pounds of pressure because you don't want to over tighten these because you can crush your A-frame. That's a huge step, and I want to keep re-emphasizing that because a lot of people just go at it with an impact driver and they don't use a torque wrench to make sure that they haven't over tightened the bolts attached to the A-frame. I think that's the reason why a lot of people may experience A-frame failure, because they over tighten their weight distribution and then they don't set up their weight distribution hitch properly and they have too much downward pressure. So when you have too much downward pressure coupled with a A-frame that's been compromised because it's buckling, you can definitely have a failure right there. So everything is good. You can see how the material is perfectly flat on the actual SteadiFlex spring bars right here. Everything's in place here. We have our 3 nuts or 3 washers there, have our retainer in place. We just now need to tighten the hitch head to the shank. Okay, so we have everything tightened, everything done except for the 2 bolts that are going to hold the hitch head to the shank. We're going to go and lower it down just to see how our weight distribution now looks. Oh, we're off the jack now. Check that out. Trailer's level. Jack legs lifting right off, and that happened because we were level, and when we preloaded the bars, we've essentially initiated the weight distribution. Okay, so we've lowered everything down. We have the tongue jack off of the ground now. You can see the little space right there. We're going to take some measurements real quick, and we're going to see how we look in terms of weight distribution. Okay, so before we were at 33 in the back. Now we are at 34, a little over 34. And then in the front, we were at 35, and now we're at 34 and a quarter. That's pretty good. Let's take a look at the trailer now. So in the front, we should be just around 22 inches, a little less than 22, and in the back, we should probably be a little over 22 inches. We still want more weight in the front than the back. About 22 and a half. Okay, so we got a little less than 22 in the front, 22 and a half in the back. I'd say it's working pretty well. I'm gonna have to show you guys a before and after shot, but Dad, what do you think?
I think it'll work. I think it'll work this way. It's pretty close. I don't know if you can get just absolutely perfect, but I think it'll be, the driving will tell.
Yeah, if we put an additional washer in, then we're going to create too much of a bowing effect in the center, and it would be too low in the back and too high in the front, which is definitely not what you want. We'd still rather more weight be towards the front, but what we've done here is we've really leveled out the truck. I mean, the truck looked really bad before. It was truly squatting. It almost looked like it was resting on the bump stops. I don't know if it was or not, but it was pretty close. But yeah, so check it out now. Truck and trailer look pretty nice. We're going to move it over to solid ground. After we tighten the two nuts right there, I got my big boy impact wrench over there that we're going to use to tighten that stuff down. Then we're going to drive it over to some flat ground real quick, take some pictures, and see how it looks. First drive, a couple things to keep in mind. We have plenty of space. You want 3 inches of space at least behind the L bracket. They're sitting perfectly flat and smooth. Probably see how they're rotating there. Nice and quiet. Truck looks good. And this is a very quiet setup because it's using automotive style braking material there for brake pads. And with the amount of pressure right there, as well as the pressure right there right now, you're getting 4 points of sway control. All right. He's gonna pull up a little bit, then we'll give you a full side profile. So here it is. I'd say we fixed the squat problem pretty dang good. How do you feel about the system?
I can already feel a difference just even rolling slowly out of the driveway. You can tell that there's a weight on the steering wheels now in the front. It's very noticeable, and I think it's going to handle a lot better than it did before. What was most noticeable is when you were passing trucks on the highway, big trucks, the front end wanted to float, and I don't think we're going to have that problem with this weight distribution behind the motorhome. I believe it's going to be just a really nice tow.
Yeah, we'll have to set it up again specifically for the motorhome because right now it's configured for the Nissan, the amount of weight distribution that the Nissan needs. But look at this. I mean, it was a ton of squat before, 33 inches. It was dropped down over 1.5 inches further than where it is right now.
I'm very pleased with the way it looks now, yes.
Yeah, that is perfectly level. That's how you want it to look. That is really, really nice. Turned out really well. Everything is working the way it should. We got everything distributed properly. It just goes to show when you first get a weight distribution hitch, you really do need to take the time to dial it in perfectly, because if you don't, it's not going to work the right way. You may be damaging the front A-frame of your trailer. So that's a big part of this. And this isn't even a Lippert trailer. This is a BAL frame that's on this trailer. So you can still crush that front frame section if you're not careful. And a lot of people, I would probably bet the vast majority of dealerships and folks who install a weight distribution hitch do not use a torque wrench to just verify that they're at least within range of how tight those bolts should be. Oftentimes, I bet most people just torque it down as much as they can, and they don't realize that they're causing deflection with their frame, and they're possibly causing the frame section to collapse. And that can be really bad, especially when you couple the amount of weight that's pressing down from those spring bars on that area that might be deformed. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. We'll put links in the description for both of these products, the tires and the weight distribution assembly, if there's something you might want to have. Just keep in mind, you should always get a weight distribution hitch that meets the capacity of the vehicle and the trailer you're going to be using it on. It would not have made sense to put a 10,000-pound weight distribution hitch on here because it could do more damage. We can't set it up properly, and it wouldn't just be overkill. It could actually work negatively against us by putting something too large on this specific setup. The reason why they have these rated for what they're rated for is because they're designed for that type of weight distribution and how you're going to be towing it. Guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.